8-bit joystick.
I have in my hand a Game Gear Micro. The amount of Sega insanity is off the charts. This is a mini console that was only released in Japan, and it might be the first micro console. You don't really hold the Game Gear Micro, you sort of pinch it carefully and hope that you don't sneeze. Is the Game Gear Micro right for you? Let's find out. The Game Gear Micro was released in 2020 and it has the bittersweet distinction of being one of the last Sega hardware consoles released. It also stands as the most recent mini console released by one of the original hardware giants from the 1980s and 90s. This was to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Game Gear being released in Japan. It is an emulator-based mini console that attempts to recreate the experience of playing Game Gear games in a form factor that fits in the palm of your hand. This thing is tiny. It is the smallest mini console that I have ever seen, and it is almost too small. This is in contrast to the Sega Game Gear, which has a glorious ergonomic form factor. I actually think that the original Sega Game Gear is one of the most comfortably designed consoles ever made. For many people, I would actually recommend that they get an original Game Gear that has been refurbished and upgraded if they want to enjoy the Game Gear's great library of games. How small is it? It is 80 millimeters wide, that is over just 3 inches, 43 millimeters tall, or 1.6 inches, and just 20 millimeters deep. It is 60% smaller than the original Game Gear. But just telling you the dimensions really doesn't drive home just how small this thing is. It feels more like a Sega Dreamcast VMU. It's like the size of something that you would want to attach to your keychain. It is teeny tiny, almost to the point where it affects the usability and ergonomics for some people. It's comfortable to play for short periods of time, but really not for long periods of time. This is something that you're going to want to pick up and play for a little bit and then move on. So here's the unit next to a Game Gear. A Sega Genesis 3-button controller, Sega Genesis 6-button controller, Nintendo NES controller, a Game Boy Advance, FPGBC, Analog Pocket, Evercade EXP, Game Boy Advance SP, SNK Neo Geo Pocket, Mew Flip, and most importantly, the Game Boy Advance Micro. That's actually an interesting comparison because they actually feel like each other and are the closest to each other's form factor. And here it is next to the miniaturized console on the Famicom Classic Edition. They're competing for the teeny tiniest gamepads. So it is shaped like a Game Gear, but luckily they didn't scale the D-pad and buttons in the exact same dimensions of the Game Gear. It has a really good Sega Game Gear D-pad and buttons and not as tiny as they could be, thank God. The Game Gear Micro features a 1.15-inch screen or 29 millimeters color LCD screen with a resolution of 240 by 180 pixels. It is teeny tiny, but is surprisingly bright and sharp and is without the persistent motion blur that was present on the original Game Gear. Now the screen is nice and crisp just as long as you hold it precisely in the right location for your eyes. Now I am nearsighted, but it took me quite a while to adjust my eyes to get it used to the Game Gear Micro. My eyeballs were doing more work than the processor. Now the ironic thing is that the older gamer demographic who this system is designed to appeal to is starting to get old eyes that are no longer as quick to adapt to different changes. I had a hard time going from my phone to the TV to the Game Gear Micro, but if I rested my eyes for a moment, it would be fine if you just find the right focal depth. They actually released a portable screen magnifier called the Big Window Micro that you clip onto it in Japan, but I do not have it. Because nothing says ergonomic design like needing a separate peripheral just to see what you're doing. Sold separately, naturally. For Sonic, it was fine, but there were a couple times when playing Puyo Puyo that I don't think I did quite as well because my stupid human eyes couldn't actually tell the teeny tiny colors and I couldn't tell the blue from the gray and it messed up my game. Maybe it's Sega's subtle way of telling me that I'm officially old. There is a teeny tiny speaker on the front, and there's a headphone jack on the top as well as a power switch and a USB micro port that is used to power the system when you're not using batteries. There is a compartment to load 2 AAA batteries lengthwise. You can expect to get 2 to 3 hours of gameplay, so I'm definitely investing in some rechargeable batteries. Actually, now that I think about it, that's actually comparable to the original Game Gear that was hungry for AA batteries. Sega is a bunch of maniacs. They recreated the battery drain of the Game Gear in the Game Gear Micro. They perfectly replicated the 90s experience of having your handheld dying right before the boss. There's a fake cartridge on the top that displays the names of the included games in Japanese. So when you boot up the system, you are taken to a menu that has the included games. But if you hold down the start button for a second, it brings up the menu. There are options to adjust and lower the screen brightness, as well as options to save and load each game with 4 save states. The emulation performance was quite good, and each game played as they should. The Game Gear is one of the more simple systems out there when it comes to power and architecture, so they better play okay. Now the games are a real kicker. There are a grand total of 4 games on each unit. And there are a total of 4 different colored units, 5 if you include a limited edition one. So if you want to get all the games, you have to buy 4 different units. It is the console equivalent of collecting Happy Meal toys, only significantly more expensive. There's no way to load more games without hacking the system, but apparently that's super easy to do. So I got the black Game Gear Micro that comes with Sonic the Hedgehog, Puyo Puyo Tsu, OutRun, and Royal Stone. There's also the blue unit, which comes with Sonic Chaos, Gunstar Heroes, Sylvan Tale, and Baku Baku Animal. The yellow system, which was full of Shining Force games, Shining Force Gaiden Ensei, Jashin no Kuni, Shining Force The Sword of Haya, Shining Force Gaiden Final Conflict, and Nazo no Pyo Are no Yo. And the red unit that had Megami Tensei Gaiden, Last Bible Special, the Game Gear Shinobi, Columns, and Megami Tensei Gaiden, Last Bible. So as you notice, a lot of those games are pretty heavy on Japanese RPGs that were untranslated. And I do speak some conversational Japanese, but not enough to sit down and play a completely untranslated game. And also the texts were teeny tiny, so I went with the black version that had 3 accessible games and 1 untranslated Japanese RPG. Sonic the Hedgehog plays like a dream. I covered it in my video, Portable Sonic Games, more like the best Sonic games. It is a reimagining of the first Sonic the Hedgehog game on 8-bit hardware. It's not a direct translation, but it's more of a reinterpretation. It is a really good game, and it's a really good time. Puyo Puyo Tsu is the sequel to a wacky creative puzzle game that of course was turned into Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, but it was a long-running beloved game series in its own right. It is a competitive puzzle game where you arrange the colors in groups of 4 and set up some pretty sweet cascading puzzle action. You're playing against a computer-controlled opponent, and it is a good wacky time guaranteed by all. This is a really good puzzle game and an excellent choice to be on here. OutRun is a really good Game Gear port of the original arcade game and not a port of the Master System version. It is a simple, very rewarding arcade racing game that has you race against checkpoints with smooth city pop and pretty chill vibes. It is a Sega classic and deserves to be on here just as much as Sonic does. Royal Stone is a strategic role-playing game, and I don't have anything against it except the text is teeny tiny and it's in Japanese. I would much rather see if I could find a ROM-hacked version that was translated into English and play it on original Sega hardware. I have nothing against it, it's just not for me. The system was released in October of 2020 with all 4 color variants with a suggested retail price of 5,000 yen apiece. That's about $50 at the time, but now it's about $35 with the current exchange rate. The yen is not doing so hot against the dollar. However, Sega did not keep up with the supply of systems to meet demand, and it quickly sold out, and now the price of a Game Gear Micro in Japan is close to $100, or about twice the cost when it originally came out just 5 years ago. Recently, I spotted a complete in-box unit at SideQuest Expo priced at just around $100. A quick search confirmed that this aligns with the current market value in Japan. Seeing it is a rare opportunity to pick up a quirky piece of Sega history, I gladly picked it up. Given its niche selection of games, high aftermarket price, and challenging ergonomics, who is the Game Gear Micro ultimately for? It is a tiny tribute to the classic Sega console, but is really for the dedicated fans. This is for the hardcore otaku without a lot of appeal to the regular Joe, and that's too bad. And if you're going to play Sega Game Gear games, I wholeheartedly recommend that you get an actual Game Gear console with a screen mod and a capacitor replace job, and then hook it up to an EverDrive or go the emulation route and get one of the absolutely awesome retro emulators or an FPGA solution like the Analog Pocket. Now, I really think that playing classic portable games benefits from playing it on a portable form factor, and you're just not going to get the same experience from playing it on your TV. They're meant to be portable. That being said, the Game Gear Micro has a ton of charm, and I'm glad that I got it. Now to track down some rechargeable AA batteries. Hey, if you like this video, you should totally check out my video on my modified Sega Game Gear. And you should totally subscribe because we make awesome videos like this each week. Thanks for watching. This is 8-Bit Joystick. Stay awesome. Play retro.